There are like 10 major categories within finance operations where our product can allow you to scale with the same team as opposed to hire more people. With our agentic layer, we have created this unique workflow for revenue integrity that emulates what people are doing today manually. The army of people that just pull data, put it on spreadsheets should go away. Our marginal cost will continue to reduce. So what we have now in terms of technology is totally sufficient to solve corporate finance.
This concept of forward deployed engineer might only exist for like a handful of quarters before it itself is automated.
Correct.
Welcome to Terminal Value. Today we're talking about a part of the finance world that most people never see, but every large company depends on, making sure the money coming in from customers is recorded correctly. When a company sells something, the transaction moves through a lot of systems: the sales system, the contract, the billing system, the accounting system, and eventually the company's financial statements. The problem is that finance teams still spend a huge amount of time manually checking whether all those systems agree with each other. SafeBooks recently emerged from stealth with a $15 million seed round to help solve that problem. They're building AI agents that sit across those financial systems, check the data, flag mistakes, and create an audit trail automatically. I'm joined by Ahikam Kaufman, co-founder and CEO of SafeBooks, to talk about what this means for the future of finance work and what happens when AI starts doing the reconciliation and controls work directly. Ahikam, thank you so much for joining.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
So, Ahikam, before we jump into SafeBooks, I'd love to get your overview on what revenue integrity means in practice today and who are the teams that own it.
So basically, in the office of the CFO, you have the chief accounting officer. Under the chief accounting officer, you have people who are deployed on what companies would call finance operations or deal desk or revenue operations. And these are the team who deals with revenue integrity. When you think about companies, large companies who have complex operations, the whole process that is usually called order to cash or revenue operation consists of many milestones. But when it comes to data integrity and financial governance and all of that, it's really all about how do you confirm that the quote which turned into a purchase order, which turned into a bunch of data in your CRM, and then billing, and then your rev rec and journal entries in your books, it's all coherent, it's all consistent. And today, finance team spend a lot of time manually checking the completeness, the accuracy, and integrity of the data for compliance purposes, for billing integrity purposes, for company policy purposes. The challenge is that if you're like a very large company or a public company, you have to also govern the data. You're not just processing the data, you also have to check it.
What's the current stack that the finance team is using to go drive to revenue integrity, and where is that process and those tools, where are they breaking down?
The tech stack would be comprised of like a CPQ for quoting, CRM, documents or document management system like Ironclad or others, a billing system, and an ERP, right? And to some extent, you may consider the banks as like the last extension of that process with like collection. So you're looking at typically between 3 to 6 different data sources that all have to be checked, reconciled, and vetted, including unstructured data like document. That's where it becomes super complex. Now, part of the justification for deploying something like SafeBooks is the fact that, again, you have to deal with multiple systems, which each of them is connected to the other, but they all process the data in different ways. So in each of them, the data is structured. But when you look at all of them, the data becomes unstructured because each of them names data fields differently and captures the data in a different manner.
I think that's a great segue into this concept of an agentic revenue integrity system. And what does that mean in practice? How does that end-to-end workflow start to change from before SafeBooks to post-deployment?
The way people are doing it today is totally manual. You can have products or solutions today that maybe extract data from documents, but then checking the data across the CPQ, the CRM, The document itself, billing and ERP is all manual. We have created, and basically in SafeBooks now with our agentic layer, you can create any workflow, work papers, and experiences, but we have created this unique workflow for revenue integrity where the workflow is configured in a way that emulates what people are doing today manually, and the system walks you through the various stages of the deal, whether it's like, is the quote matching the CRM, is the CRM data matches the document, then does billing conforms with the terms which are stipulated in the contract or whatever, and then RevRec and all of that. So that's like the flows, the milestones you need to go to through, and basically the workflows we created for agentic revenue management emulate or automate that process, providing finance teams the ability to look at every transaction, every deal above a certain threshold and see where it's okay or where the process requires additional scrutiny because we've identified a flaw in the process. So
one of the areas that I've talked about or talked to more founders in the applied AI space that they emphasize is the concept of this contextual layer. And my understanding is in SafeBooks model, the contextual layer is this concept of a financial data graph. Could you speak a little bit to how that's created? What are the important parts that really make up that graph?
in every financial process, multiple systems comes to play. In each of them, the data is structured differently. So it's really important in the case of finance operations to be able to link and marry all the data together, being able to identify the full routing of each and every transaction before we can apply any automation or governance or anything like that. Think about like a quote to a customer that translated into a sales order or even a contract which could have like multiple billing phases and multiple treatments from a RevRec perspective. How do you take all of that and marry it together in a way that an agent can check it as if it was a human being? In order to do that, you have to create a graph that link the various data nodes from the various data systems for each and every transaction. And unless you do that, you can't give the agents the right context to check the amount, to check the completeness of the amount, whether that full contract value was actually broken down into these different billing schedules and they all match, and whether the RevRec entries actually match whatever you built. In SafeBooks, you can actually see for the first time the audit trail for each and every transaction across the systems for the first time. The way the graph is structured, it's how you would portray an audit trail. Take a single transaction from all the systems and just show it as kind of like a single line item. That's like how the graph is structured. And we're using a lot of AI in the process to be able to understand the various data structures of each of the systems in the customer's tech stack and how do we marry it together. How do we link it together? How do we link the customer names? How do we link customer IDs from the various systems? How do we link the amounts? How do we link currencies? And we create that gigantic graph, which can only exist in an AI infrastructure. No human being can work on that graph. But this is the perfect infrastructure or foundation to allow agents to see all the data end to end.
A lot of that power is driven by the fact that you sit on top of all these systems. And so I guess in that, my question to you is, how do you manage that from a deployment standpoint? Do you have this concept of forward deployed engineers to help set up the system with customers? Like, what does that deployment process look like?
We started with 4 deployed engineers to be able to create a graph for each company. But over time, the mix of AI in the process got us into a way where today it's actually pretty sophisticated, and the time to connect the graph to a specific customer environments went down from like a few weeks to a few days or even like a
Wow.
couple of days. Not only that, again, the system understands using our agentic brain, the system understands the data structure of each system, and then it understands how to link all of that to the graph. So a lot of work that used to be manual on our side, just linking linking your data sources to the graph is now being done automatically. So of course our agentic workforce has like the skills, the trained skills on how it should look at the data and all of that, and the data structure. And of course, after doing several implementations that includes the Salesforce of the world, the NetSuite of the world, the Oracle Fusion of the world, then the system is training itself. But we're using AI even to deploy the system, which is pretty cool.
Man,
Yeah,
that's incredible. That's incredible. Yeah, it's funny. This concept of forward deployed engineer might only exist for like a handful of quarters before
correct,
it itself is
correct.
automated.
Correct.
Unbelievable.
We actually, not only that, I can tell you that we started with a couple of years ago with engineers actually helping to configure these kind of agents that do the work. And then we got it to a point where you can use low code, and we had analysts, and now it's fully agentic. So we're using, because we're keeping the analyst team, we're using them to create the prompts,
I
but
see.
basically the customer can now create it itself. So
Yeah.
you need very little human in the loop to actually deploy the system and configure the system.
Where do you target customer base wise? Do you feel like there's a certain size
Yeah,
that's necessary to warrant
yeah,
this
yeah.
type of product?
Let's say between 50 to $250 million in revenues. I'm using that as a proxy as opposed to number of employees. So if you're between 50 to 250, then I'd like to think that given our current agentic capabilities, deployment could be really fast. Imagine if you're like that company, we can make you up and running in a week. And then not only is that we can, you can automate yourself a lot of your processes, but also you can ask the system any question. So any question you would use an analyst, any work paper, any set of work, you can ask the system. So imagine you're a CFO of a $150 million company, and you drive your car and you connect to our Slack channel on your mobile, and you can ask the system to tell you how your pipeline looks like. Do you see any anomalies in billing? Who's the top sales rep performer? Who's the sales rep that has the most deals which have issues that are not approved in the order management or the deal desk? All kind of questions. And if we have the full context between your CRM, ERP, and billing, the system will give you all these answers. So on top of like automating your processes and automating your documentation work papers, you can also ask any question and the system would just spit out the answer.
How do you think about pricing in this model? Obviously, there's been a movement away from your traditional SaaS pricing model to cover the costs of the on the gross margin side of AI. And so, how do you think about balancing both pricing to ensure that you can maintain your margin while also, I imagine your customers ask for predictability as well. And so, how do you balance the tension?
No, that's a very, very good question. I think we're moving from a flat SaaS to even a lower SaaS because the deployment is much faster. So basically, our SaaS fee should cover the cost of technology that we've developed and kind of like the cost of enabling the technology. We don't charge like a special professional fee. We just say you'll get like a fixed SaaS pricing and you can use that. And I think we can also incorporate, now that we enable you all these agentic capabilities, to be able to pay per use when you, let's say, you configure more use cases or more controls. So there will be like a slightly variable cost to cover any agentic capabilities, whether it's like around reading documents or just developing whatever. So for the mid market, you can look at a price of between 25K to 75K. And then there could be a variable piece that, would just cover the cost of compute and all of that. But I think over the last 6, 9 months, because we've made so much progress with our agentic capabilities, we actually can charge less for the platform because
Yeah, yeah,
again, in the at the end of the world, in the economy world, you can either charge a lot and do it across smaller number of accounts, or you can reduce the price if you found a way to have like a very repeatable set of use cases. And now we don't need to focus on use cases because you can, on the agentic layer, you can develop any relevant use cases you want for your own company.
Yeah.
Then the cost of it's like mass production. So we give
Yeah.
you this tool, this platform. The platform reads your data, understands your data end to end. We shake hands on this when we deploy, and then you go and do your own stuff, and that's it. And the system kind of like develops it for you. So you don't need a human in the loop. We don't need to kind of like have a service as a software even to some extent.
Hmm.
I think in larger enterprises, there could be that where we start with a point solution for a pain, and then you can work from there. For the point solution for pain, maybe we'll price it more like a project, like more like the traditional SaaS. But
I see.
for the mid market, $50 to $250 million in revenues, just take the platform for that fee, which varies, depends on the size of your data and whatever, a few parameters between 25K, 75K, and go from there.
Yeah, you mentioned something interesting, which is you're already lowering your own cost structure through the automation of the deployment side. Do you see a world in the near future where your model costs will come down because you won't need to upgrade to the latest models to deliver your product? Or how do you balance kind of being on the frontier side versus delivering your solution with more affordable models?
Because we provide the accurate context for the agents, the level of sophistication is that even we have now is very acceptable. The data is structured. You're not trying to emulate atomic fusion. You're just trying to read across data, unstructured and structured financial data. So I'd like to think even with the current sophistication of the models, and it's enough. So I'd like to think we don't need to from here onwards. We don't need to, because again, everything that needs to be invented in how finance is processed was already invented. It's
Yeah.
like there's no. So I'd like to think even today it's pretty straightforward. It's very different from vibe coding or
Mm,
security or cyber security, where all of a sudden you also have all kind of developments, right? And you need to keep up, and the new models will have more right. Finance is pretty consistent, so I'd like to think our marginal cost would remain the same or will continue to reduce. So I think what we have now in the world in terms of like technology is totally sufficient to solve most of the use cases in corporate finance.
yeah, I completely agree. And I think the more I talk to leaders in the applied AI space, a lot of them come back with very similar answers, which is, hey, I have this evaluation bar that my customer will hold me to. And so long as I can hit the metrics that are needed, I can be on more affordable models. So I think this whole gross margin concern over time goes away. So I like how you think about it. How do you think about the competitive space? And in some of my research, I was looking at some of the players who are like the legacy month end players, so like BlackLine, FloQast. But do you see those players as competitive, or are they more adjacent in a kind of pure ERP focused close
Yeah,
process?
there is an existing category in corporate finance called record to report, close management. And companies like BlackLine and FloQast and even Numeric, they play an important role there. We're more like at the data layer. So most of our customers, they have one of these platforms. The thing about this platform, they're solving for close management. They're solving for various types of reconciliations around the ERP, not across systems. And also some of them or many of them are heavy and expensive to implement. So I don't know
Mhm.
how this category will evolve. But this is at the category above us. We're at the
Yeah.
data level where people are deployed because you need to do VLOOKUPs across data from four systems. You need to
Mhm.
check, you need to apply kind of like SOX controls. But these SOX controls have very little business values because they're not done in real time across
Yeah.
100% of the data. And we enable you to do it in real time across 100% of the data. So all of a sudden, it's not a SOX control, it's a business control, right? Helping you to avoid billing errors, which the customer are going to find out before you will find out.
Yeah.
So the way I'd like to think about it is like we are very much oriented into automating finance operations. So it's not like record to report. It's not like, BlackLine is a huge platform with even security controls. It's just something. It's a different animal, much heavier, and we're like this very light to deploy, fully agentic. This is not a 20-year-old tech stack, fast to deploy, being deployed in weeks, where all of a sudden we see all your data, we can automate any work paper, we can automate any process across systems which these systems are not geared towards, and you can ask the data any question.
Yeah.
So it's a Tesla versus maybe a Lexus.
Yeah, the thing I didn't appreciate 10 years ago that I do now is the point you're making around the deployment, which is you can have an extremely heavy, super functional product, and if you can't deploy it successfully, it doesn't matter. That among the points that you're making around real time and being embedded in the business process.
Nick, maybe I'll give you an example. For many years, I invested in companies. I've invested in about 60, 70 companies. One of my portfolio companies earlier today is raising its A. So I got 10 documents and a cap table, and now I need to look into that. So what we've been all used to do until like 6 months or 12 months ago was to tell the CEO, hey, great work, where do I sign, right? Now I took a model, I uploaded all the documents, I prompted everything I wished I would have asked myself if I would have read the documents.
Yeah.
And within 3 minutes, I got a set of 4 or 5 comments, including errors in the documents, which I sent to the lawyers, right? So, for us, the ability to use agentic layer inside our platform to understand your CRM data structure, which is mostly repetitive, but the ability to understand all these nuances in seconds as opposed to weeks and configure the system accordingly is like, I don't know, it's like magic. So so and it's just working. So, and again, it's all structured data, right? Finance is not like atomic physics. It's not like, complex cybersecurity. It's very structured. So we can bring that magic into the world of finance, and it significantly transforms how it's easy now to control all your data across systems to get, and again, without our technology, without the SafeBooks graph and all that foundation infrastructure, even if you use the best cloud, it will not have the context that we provide. So we actually partner virtually with Claude in order to give you the full context and the accurate set of data, which is essential for agent to be able to provide you with the right answers, the right documentation, the right controls over your
Yeah.
business processes.
As you see SafeBooks start to proliferate in the market and change the day-to-day workflow for finance teams, how do you see the landscape for financial employment? What changes within that organization more broadly?
I'd like to think that because, especially in finance, you basically deploy people to check data, to validate data, and that data is easily captured and processed. I think it's going to change things significantly. I think where um, people will continue to be essential at some aspect of the governance. It's like you can have the agentic workforce like SafeBooks be the preparer, which is like a term for SOX, and then the human in the loop is the reviewer. But you don't need like the people to prepare a lot of the work or create, because you do need segregation of duties. And the other thing is like you can have people really focus on, instead of digesting the data and checking the data, and like making accounting decisions, which is what really
Yeah.
accountants are really required for, as opposed to the army of people that just pull data, put it on spreadsheets, run all kind of like macros or VLOOKUPs and things like that. So all of that tedious, repetitive manual work should go away. All the brain work, a lot of that would still require people.
Yeah, that makes sense. Your platform already is rapidly evolving. You and I were talking about that earlier. You guys started obviously in the review integrity space, but where do you see SafeBooks evolving over the next handful of years? And what does that look like from a product standpoint, from an end customer experience standpoint?
Our vision is that all the finance operations work should be automated. It should be automated because the machine would make much less errors than human beings. The work will be done in real time. Close processes could be shortened to a couple of days if you need close at all, because you basically close every day or every hour in many senses. Think about like things today like accruals, right? Accruals is the way accounting treats missing transactions, right? What's the ability of a model to learn your spend structure and identify those missing expenses which you can post as accrual entries? It's
Yeah.
nothing. Our passion is just about automating all this data related finance operations work. And I think because of the agentic capabilities gave us the present of being able to treat small customer as a large customer, meaning it doesn't need to be price sensitive. The system could deploy itself and the customer could self-serve using the platform, even if you're a small company, and get the benefits of a heavy platform with a significant portion of services provided to enterprises. Because the system learns your data, you can create your own use cases, your own documentation, you can ask the data questions, and the agentic just does the work. Being able to replace a lot of the heavy lifting, data related heavy lifting in finance operations across revenue integrity, spending integrity, accrual processes, reconciliations, policy enforcement, payroll integrity, right? So, I'd like to think there are like 10 major categories within finance operations where our product can allow you to scale with the same team as opposed to hire more people, just building use cases on the platform. That's kind of my vision. I think it's significant enough.
Yeah, it's an incredible vision. Ahikam, thank you so much for your time. This was fantastic. I appreciate you.
Thank you so much, Nick.
It was an interesting conversation. My takeaway is that SafeBooks isn't just an example of AI for finance, it's an example of how applied AI products may become more defensible over time. First, the value comes from cross system context. SafeBooks sits across the financial stack: sales systems, contracts, billing, ERP, and accounting. And that cross system view may be difficult for any one incumbent to replicate. Second, context can become an asset. Once you build a financial data graph that understands the customer's transactions, that same context can support more use cases: revenue integrity, spend controls, accruals, and so on. And third, deployment itself may get cheaper than we thought. If AI can automate more of the work traditionally done by the forward deployed engineers, then the products may not just be powerful, they may become easier to scale. That to me is the bigger terminal value theme. The more interesting applied AI companies are not just putting a model on top of a workflow, they're building context, using that context to do real work, and then compounding that context into more and more of the operating system of the business. Thank you for watching Terminal Value. I'll see you next week.